Dutch Schultz was a notorious mobster in the 1920s and 1930s who made a fortune through organized crime such as bootlegging and racketeering. Schultz's rackets were weakened by 2 tax evasion trials led by prosecutor Thomas Dewey. Because of this, Schultz asked the National Crime Syndicate for permission to kill Dewey in an attempt to avoid conviction, but they refused. When Schultz disobeyed them and attempted to murder Dewey, the National Crime Syndicate ordered his death in 1935. This is the story of Dutch Schultz and the National Crime Syndicate. Arthur Simon Flegenheimer was born August 6, 1901 in the Bronx, New York, to German Jewish immigrants, Hermann and Emma Flegenheimer. Unfortunately, very little is known about his father, as early on in his life, his father abandoned his family. Emma listed as divorced in the 1910 census, so that is how we know. Of course, this had a big impact on young Arthur's life, as he dropped out of the 8th grade to help support his mother and younger sister. He worked various jobs before joining Schultz Trucking in the Bronx around 1916, where he worked for the next 3 years. Before working for Schultz Trucking, he was a feeder and a pressman. Working in the slums of the Bronx, he also started his criminal career of petty burglaries and theft, which led to his arrest at the age of 17. He was sent to prison for burglary, where he served 17 months at Blackwell's Island. The prison staff found him to be disruptive and unmanageable, so they transferred him to West Hampton Farms to work the farm, from which he escaped. He was recaptured and given an additional 2 months to his sentence. He was paroled on December 8, 1920. When he was released from prison on parole on December 8, 1920, he returned to work at Schultz Trucking. With the start of Prohibition, the shipping company began smuggling liquor and beer into New York City from Canada. During one of the deliveries, Schultz shot and killed his first victim. When the company heard about this, him and the owner had an argument, which led to him quitting his job at Schultz Trucking. In the midst of all this, he began associating himself with known criminals such as Lucky Luciano and started going by the name Dutch Schultz. After he quit his job at Schultz Trucking, he began working for their Italian competitors. In 1928, Joey No, another mobster, opened the Hub Social Club. Dutch Schultz was hired to work in it. Working there, Schultz had earned his reputation for his brutality, and No was impressed by this, and they soon became partners. Schultz and No soon made their own gang, which opened more illegal drinking joints around the Bronx, and ran bootlegging operations for New York City bars. The Rock Brothers were another gang in the Bronx who had owned that territory for a while. When they declined to purchase their beer, the two gangs went to war. The older brother, John Rock, decided it was not worth it and did not go to war, but the younger brother stood his ground. One night, Schultz's gang kidnapped and brutalized the younger brother. According to sources, the Rock brothers' family reportedly paid $35,000 for his release. Shortly after his return, he went blind. The No and Schultz gang began to expand in Manhattan's Upper West Side into the neighborhoods of Washington Heights, Yorkville, and Harlem. When Schultz and No moved their headquarters to the Bronx to Manhattan, it brought them into direct competition with Jack Legs Diamond, a very powerful Irish mobster. Soon, a full-scale war broke out between the two gangs. In October of 1929, Diamond and his mistress were dining in their pajamas in her suite at the Hotel Monticello when a gunman broke down the door and sprayed the room with machine gun fire, hitting Diamond 5 times. After recovering from his wounds, Diamond left New York to stay in Europe. During his absence, the Diamond gang was forced to relocate out of the city. When Diamond returned home, he began carving out a new territory for himself in Albany, well away from Schultz. It was also around this time that the National Crime Syndicate was founded in 1929 by Johnny Torrio. The National Crime Syndicate, which was a national alliance with many organized crime figures, was attended by leading underworld figures throughout the United States. This list included Torrio, Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, Frank Costello, Joe Adonis, Dutch Schultz, Abner Longies Wellman, and many more underworld figures. The National Crime Syndicate was created to unify competing gangs. With the end of Prohibition, the power of each gang were significantly weakened, as they could not rely on the black market for their profits. So they set up a commission to divide up the turf and regulate markets. One of those affected by the end of Prohibition was Dutch Schultz. He needed a new source of income, and his answer came with a man named Otto Berman and the Harlem Numbers Racket. A racket was a fraudulent and often illegal activity that is often carried out by means of extortion or intimidation. Berman let Schultz fix the Harlem rackets, ensuring that Schultz always controlled which numbers won, guaranteeing a larger amount of losers in Harlem, and a multi-million-dollar a month tax-free income for Schultz. Jules Martin, a powerfully built gangster, served as a point man for Schultz and his rackets. He successfully extracted thousands of dollars in tributes and dues from restaurant owners. Schultz suspected Martin of stealing $70,000 from what Schultz was earning from his rackets. He knew this because of his tax trials. When Martin Jules said he was entitled to the money because he had worked for him for so long, Schultz pulled out a gun and shot Jules Martin dead. A first-hand account from Davis said, Schultz stuck it in Jules Martin's mouth and pulled the trigger. It was as simple and undramatic as that. Just one quick motion of the hand. Dutch Schultz did that murder just as casually as if he were picking his teeth. Schultz's rackets were threatened by Lucky Luciano and tax evasion trials led by prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey. In an effort to avert his conviction, he asked the National Crime Syndicate for permission to kill Dewey. The National Crime Syndicate rejected. When Schultz disobeyed the National Crime Syndicate and attempted to carry out the hit himself, They ordered his murder in 1935. He was shot once below the heart in the bathroom of the Palace Chop House restaurant, but staggered out and sat at a table. The hit was carried out by National Crime Syndicate members Charles Workman and Mandy Wise. Whether Dutch Schultz feared going to jail or anticipating his own death, he had reportedly buried a treasure trove in the Catskill Mountains. The contents of this treasure trove are still a mystery, but it is rumored to contain a vast sum of money, bonds, and other valuables. In the aftermath of Schultz's death, his criminal organization quickly fell apart, with his top lieutenants either fleeing the country or being arrested and being convicted on various charges. The No Schultz operation, which had been one of the most powerful non-Italian gangs in New York City, had effectively been dismantled, paving the way for the rise of the Italian-American mafia as the most dominant force in organized crime. Schultz's death marked the end of the era in the criminal underworld. Despite his ruthless tactics and violent nature, he had been one of the most successful and influential gangsters of his time, building a criminal empire that spanned multiple industries and racking in millions of dollars in illegal profits. Today, the legacy of Dutch Schultz lives on, both in annals of criminal history and in popular culture. His story has been told in countless books, movies, and television shows, and his name remains one of the most memorable of the Prohibition era.